You know, I'm not really 100% sure how to do the thing I'm about to do, or if it's even gonna work. Now, before we dive in, I just want to take a moment and talk to you guys about how awesome you are, because every now and again I get a sponsor that just kind of resonates, right? A sponsor that makes sense because I've been using their product for years before this channel even existed. And I think you guys can kind of sense that. When that happens, you engage and you click the link and you get something really cool, and the sponsor's happy because you guys clicked the link, and I'm happy because they might come back for round 2. And, well, that's exactly what happened here. That's right, Woodworkers Guild of America is back for round 2, baby! Woodworkers Guild of America is your online resource for woodworking instructions, ideas, and information. With premium videos like The Essentials of Good Design or Chamfering Wood Drawer Pulls, Woodworkers Guild of America's professional instructors walk you through each technique with step-by-step demonstrations, providing their expert tips and tricks along the way. But Eric, why should I sign up for Woodworkers Guild of America? That is an excellent question, and I'm so glad you asked. There are 3 main reasons why you should sign up. Number 1. Woodworkers Guild of America is one of the resources I used early on in my woodworking journey, and it helped me to learn the foundational skills to get me to where I am today. Number 2, you'll have access to Woodworking Guild of America's live streaming tutorials and Q&As where expert instructors share their tips, answer questions, and engage with the community in real time. And number 3, and I cannot stress this enough, by clicking the link in the description and checking out what Woodworkers Guild of America has to offer, you are directly supporting my channel and allowing me to continue to be able to put out content for you all. Now those feel like pretty good reasons, don't they? Don't they? So, if you want to see what Woodworkers Guild of America has to offer, check out my link below. The first 1,000 of you to click the link in the description will get a full year of premium membership to Woodworkers Guild of America for only $1.49. And a big thanks to Woodworkers Guild of America for sponsoring this week's video. So here's the deal. I need to build a piece for a gallery show that I've been invited to be a part of, which is a wonderful thing. That was a career goal. I'm very excited to be in that position, and I'm grateful for that. But I think I want to do something that is more self-reflectory than maybe perhaps they're looking for. Do something that kind of embodies what I think about as like that last 5%. The thing that you do is beautiful, it's wonderful, it works, and then because you have a deadline, because you have a client, because you have a gallery show that it needs to get done by, the last kind of 5% of the details get left to the wayside. They get forgotten about, they get shoved into the back closet. Ow! And those tiny things that I think deserve attention, that can elevate a piece from interesting to outstanding, often get looked over. Because at the end of the day, we have deadlines, we have bills to pay, we have businesses to run. Now, the thing is, I've got about 3 weeks to do this piece. And while I know what the object is going to be and what the overall form is going to look like, I don't know how to articulate that key component. The whole point of the piece is that something is unfinished or looked over, and there has to be a real tension there for it to work. It has to be visually obvious that that is the case without looking sloppy. And I don't know how I'm going to pull that off yet.
Now, if I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times on this channel.
The first critical thing that you are making a decision about in building a piece of furniture is grain selection. And you can see here that I'm taking all of my components out of a slab, and that's for two reasons. The first is due to coloring. If I take all of my components for this cabinet out of the same tree, then I lessen the color variation in the material. Even if I'm taking it from the same species, different trees can have different colorations. The second is going to be grain selection. By taking it out of a slab and a thicker slab, this slab's about 10/4 or 2.5 inches thick, that allows me to choose what components are flat sawn versus rift sawn versus quarter sawn, and more intentionally manipulate the lines of the piece itself. Now, this approach isn't for every situation and every piece because by its very nature, it's going to take more work because now I have to resaw all of my components out, and we'll get to that in a second, but I do want to acknowledge that I did have a 1/4 inch utility blade in my bandsaw, and I had to then go and put a proper resaw blade on there, which I don't do every time. You can resaw with a 1/4 inch blade. However, if I'm doing a lot of resawing or I'm resawing a very dense or expensive material, as is the case here, then I'm going to put a proper resaw blade on there so that I get more accurate cuts, less flex in the blade, and potentially less waste overall. And then once I have my pieces resawn, I can sticker them and let them rest for a minimum of 24 hours, but preferably they would be in the range of 48 to 72 hours to allow any of the tension that we've introduced by resawing to relax and to let these pieces acclimate to the new environment because they may have a different moisture content on the interior of a thick slab than on the exterior, which you can see me checking right there. And then I'm just gonna let them sit. Now, back to the inefficiency of taking your materials out of a slab, the biggest downside is that I effectively have to mill my material twice. I have to cut it out of the slab and resaw it and let it sit for a couple of days, and then I can take it to the joiner, planer, and table saw and cut it down to size, which is not a step that I have to do when I buy standard 4/4, 5/4, 6/4 material from the lumber yard. But what it does buy me is the ability to be very particular about grain selection and oftentimes being able to book match components of a piece to give it a more balanced feel. So you can see right here, I have the left and right side of my cabinet, which are identical, and it makes it feel a lot more considered and a lot more balanced. Now, I'm not going to dive into how I cut these houndstooth dovetails in this video because I've already got a video on that, which I'll link for you up in the corner. But what I do want to say about them is this is another kind of critical component of the design of the piece or the statement I'm trying to make here, which is beautiful wood, highly sought after, curly English walnut with exceptional, well, I hope exceptional joinery in it, this kind of showy houndstooth dovetail that says, look at me, look what I can do. And hopefully that's going to be juxtaposed with something on the interior that feels unfinished. do I risk blowing this out? Because it is a risky game.
What do you mean? What do we risk blowing it out for what?
Assembling.
As opposed to, like, what's the alternative option?
I don't need to assemble. Oh no. I know. It's a risky game.
It is.
Okay, I'm going to assemble it once, mark out where the front of each component falls,
Great.
so I can put my knife hinges in, because these aren't going to move laterally now.
True.
So I can install my knife hinges with a gap, make sure my shelves all fit, mark my curve, so I'll have my reveal for the front too, and then I do not have to reassemble until glue up. I think that's the plan.
You just have to make it through one.
Gotta make it through one. That's planning. The other thing I'm going to do before I do anything else is sweep.
Sweet.
In case it breaks off, I can find it.
Planning.
That's experience.
Wow.
Wow, wow, wow. And now with the cabinet dry fit, I can start to focus on making the door. Now, I decided to cooper the door for a few reasons. First and foremost, coming back to the object, the concept that I'm trying to relay is extremely refined, beautifully presented object that then has some element that's unrefined on the interior, that's kind of hidden. And adding a cooper door kind of brings up the, I hate to use the word elegance, but it has a subtle curvature to it that's really nice. And it also just adds a component of craftsmanship to it. So that plays into the concept on the exterior of this cabinet. But the other reason is just because curves are sexy and I wanted to do a cooper door. I haven't done coopering in a while, and so I wanted to explore that concept the same way that I wanted to explore those houndstooth dovetails, which I hadn't done before. Now, coopering as a technique, at least in this particular application, is not that complicated. It's essentially cutting a bunch of pieces of wood at an angle and then gluing them together at that angle to create a curve. Traditional coopering, where we get this term from as far as barrel making, that's a whole different set of worms. That's not a phrase. That's a whole different can of worms that we're not going to get into right now, because you're talking about heat bending, you're talking about tapered coopering. That's a whole different ballgame. But a straight cooper like this is very, very simple. All I did was I set the table saw at 2.5-ish degrees and made my rips on all sides, and then I can come in and I can glue them up. Now, I typically joint my coopered angles just so that I have a perfectly smooth surface. You can joint them by hand. I just set my jointer fence to the same angle as my table saw, cut them down on there, make sure that my joint surfaces are absolutely perfect before I glue them up, and everything looks good and easy. And you can do it with blue tape, because I'm not doing such a crazy cooper. I'm not doing half a circle. I'm not doing even a quarter of a circle. I'm just doing a small arc. So gluing it up with blue tape, it has enough flexibility in there to get a nice tight joint closed. And then after a couple hours, once this glue has set, it's time to start shaping. Now, I want this thing to be perfectly smooth. I want it to have a perfectly smooth interior concave surface and a perfectly smooth exterior convex surface, so that's going to require a good bit of hand tool work on my end. So let's pause for a moment to talk about shaping coves or interior curves. So there's a number of ways you could do it. You could just sit here with a sander and sand for 8 days. But what I found over the years is sometimes that leaves you with an uneven surface. That's definitely the way I'm going to finish shaping this cove, but it's not the way I want to shape most of this material. What I'm going to do is use a scraper because it's a gentle enough curve where I can actually get in here and flex that to the curve that I need. And a gooseneck scraper, which is going to be really helpful, but this actually is a little bit too tight of a curve in order to get the effect that I want. So what I'm doing is breaking out a thing that I haven't used in a year and a half maybe, old Smiling Sammy right here. Now, all this is a card scraper that I've shaped the bottom of to match the profile of the radius. The profile of the...
What do you mean?
That sounds like the right math. It's the card scraper matches the bottom of the tool, and this is very clearly just a shop-made tool that I slapped together while I was doing a fellowship so that I could, again, shape the internal coves of a piece of a leg that I made for a client. But it's going to apply right here in the same way. I'm just going to remove the material in the middle of these staves to kind of dish them out a little bit to meet the angle where they actually connect to the other staves. So this is going to help me do that relatively efficiently, the same way that I would with this tool, but it's going to be a little bit easier on the thumbs. So now this is an aggressive cut, and that's okay. You can see how aggressive these shavings are for a scraper, but again, it's a shaping tool. I can come in here with a finer scraper afterward and refine it, and then of course sand this surface smooth. So my goal is to get this to be as close to a perfect arc as I can, and then I can flip it around and start working the front side with a plane. Now with my carcass and my door done, I can move on to some of the detail work, in this case, setting the hinges. Now, I'm doing this pre-glue up because I'm using knife hinges, and the reason I'm using knife hinges is because I don't really want to see big bulky butt hinges on the outside of this cabinet, though there's nothing wrong if I had made that decision, just an aesthetic choice I'm making, and installing knife hinges before the glue up is traditionally easier than doing them after the carcass is glued up because things just get really tight in there. Sometimes I do it after glue up when I have to, but in this case, much simpler to do it before glue up. Then I can move on to shaping some of the components. Remember, the door has that nice arc to it. It's a Coopered door, so I want the top and bottom to mirror that same line. So I just roughed it out on the bandsaw, took it to the belt sander, and smoothed it out until everything was nice and beautiful and even. And then I could put on a thumbnail profile using a spoke shave. Now, you could do this with a router. You could get a specialized thumbnail cutter bit. You could put a chamfer on there. You could put a 45. You could put a roundover, whatever makes you smile. But I tend to use this thumbnail profile quite a bit because it's just not as common a shape in router profile heads, and I feel like it gives it a nice little bit of hand touch to it. But that's just my opinion. You do you, boo. Whatever makes you smile. Now, y'all know I love a hand plane for surface prep. I'm not going to tell you that one is better than the other. If you want to sand, sand. If you want a hand plane, hand plane. It is a choice of workflow. But for me, I love a good hand plane. But note, I always sand after I plane a surface because I want to open up those fibers a little bit to accept finish. So I'll do the majority of the work with my hand planes, and then I'll come in with a sander and just touch it up. And then, once my profiles are shaped and my hinges are mortised and my surfaces are all sanded, it's time to do a glue up.
That's a good bacon, egg, and cheese, too. Now, let's talk about this.
All right, here's where things sit. Currently, the cabinet is all glued up. Everything looks good. Everything feels good. Joinery all came together really nicely. I used hide glue, or old brown glue rather, to give me that extended open time. And it really was very nice and easy to glue up, even though this joinery right here, buttering that up in time and at speed, is not the easiest thing to do in the world. So that was a delight. Now it's time to focus on kind of the two remaining design elements, which is the back panel and the drawer. So I've got my panel kind of roughed out. This is going to be book matched, and it's gonna look something like that. It's delightful, it's beautiful. The question is, where on this panel does my back panel actually fall? So if it sits down here, I'm gonna get a little bit of a flare going out with the sapwood, which I really like. If it sits further up here, I'm going to get more sapwood, which I would love to see because this has some really nice figure to it. But I also have these little pinholes, these pin knots in here, which I don't know if that's what I want to see in the back panel. So I'm leaning more toward having it further down and not seeing those pinholes. So I think that's where it's going to go right now. I'm going to get this milled and see what it actually looks like when it's book matched together. Then for the drawer front, I think I'm going to use some sycamore, which I have kicking around. Some real nice English sycamore, very straight grain, very quartered, and very pale. So that's going to contrast really nicely with that warm chocolatey brown of the English walnut. That's the idea, that's the hope. I say, let's just start making a bloody thing and get this thing as near to sexy as we can today. Let's go. Hold on. I already did this part. If you want to find out how I make frame and panels, you can click that link in the upper right-hand corner. But for right now, let's just blow through this. All right, let's see. Where are we at? The drawer? All right, let's do the drawer. Now, this is the internet, so it doesn't matter what I do, somebody's gonna tell me I'm doing something wrong or I'm dumb, and that's fine. That's discourse on some level, I suppose. But I want to remind you what the point of this cabinet was. It's that juxtaposition between the attention to detail and that last 5% that just gets swept under the rug because of deadlines and clients. And this is not a new problem. This is not a uniquely American problem. If you look at old furniture, the backs of cabinets were often left off the saw or the scrub plane, or the drawer box was often done by an apprentice and it's sloppy and sometimes nailed together. And so it felt like that was the right place to try to visualize this problem, is in the drawer box. So I originally wanted to use a 2x4, but I couldn't get the material flat enough to make a working drawer box without losing the stamp. So I took a piece of reclaimed Doug fir I engraved that stamp on it using the Shaper Origin and charred some wood and used charcoal to darken that engraving. And it worked really well. I was actually surprised how well that worked. And then to continue that theme, I decided that I was going to nail that drawer box together rather than do quote unquote proper joinery. So I got some 6-penny galvanized nails, I cut them down to size, and I rabbited and nailed this drawer box to try to achieve that dissonant feeling, that jarring effect when you see these beautiful houndstooth dovetails on the outside of this English walnut, and then you see that stamp and those nails and how they play off of one another hopefully achieves the effect that I want. Now, with all these major components complete, let's just power through and get this cabinet done. Listen, I've said it before, I'll say it again. Wood is a fickle mistress. And when I say things like that, this is exactly what I mean. I am now 4 coats into the finishing process. Put on 2 coats, sanded it with 320, put on a 3rd coat, sanded it with 600, put on a 4th coat. And the cabinet is perfect. It's exactly where I want it to be. It's got a perfect sheen. It's an even coat. The back panel I changed up a little bit, but I just put on 1 more coat and it's exactly, again, where I want it to be. The door, however, is a little under sheen still. And I think this is because this is from a different stick. I'm not 100% sure if it was from the same tree. It looks like it's a mildly different color, so I'm going to guess that it was a different tree of English walnut. But it needs to be abraded back and get another coat on there to get the sheen even with the cabinet itself. So, wood, every tree has its own properties. Every stick from the same tree will have its own properties. And by all accounts, it doesn't make much sense why it would be a different sheen from the cabinet outside of the fact that this probably just absorbed more material, more finish when I put the first couple of coats on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this gray Scotch-Brite and I'm going to apply this coat of finish with this to simultaneously abrade the surface and build up another layer, and hopefully that will give me a thinner layer, because what I don't want to do is to apply too much and bring this up to like a plasticky high gloss level. That's not what I want. That's not what I go for. So I'm going to do that and pray to the dryads that that works. Now, there are almost certainly a few of you wondering if I hit my deadline, and I'm happy to say that I did. I got it done, I got it photographed, and I got it up to the gallery on time. So hey, if you're up in Mid-Coast, Maine, and you feel like stopping by the Messler Gallery, go give it a shot, go give it a look. I think it's a delightful object, and whether or not it's successful in what I was attempting to say, I mean, listen, I know it's a little artsy-fartsy. I know it's not for everybody, but If you've been watching me make things for any amount of time, you know that I'm going to push myself. I'm going to try to do things that maybe I can't do, and I'm going to risk failure. And I think I did that at least successfully on this piece. And, well, it holds whiskey, so you can't be too mad about it. Till next time, friends.